Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon or good morning, depending where you're joining us from. And welcome to today's webinar, Telebehavioral Health Services, Planning and Investing for the Future of Your Services. This is session 6, Rollout Lessons, Recommendations for Training, Known Issues with Provider Training and Lessons Learned. Next slide, please. This webinar is sponsored by the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC, housed at Rutgers in the School of Health Professions in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Kathy, and I'm the project coordinator of this center, and we'll be hosting this webinar today. The MHTTC is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, to enhance the capacity of the behavioral health and other related workforces to deliver evidence-based and empirically supported practices to individuals with mental illnesses. Please visit the MHTTC Network website for additional information at mhttcnetwork.org. Next slide, please. During this webinar, we encourage you to interact with our presenter by using the chat feature. Please post any comments or questions you have in the chat, and I will collect your questions as we go and ask them of the presenter during the Q&A time towards the end of the presentation. During the webinar, our presenter may pose questions to you, so please use the chat feature to answer those questions. Next slide, please. And if you're interested in staying up to date with the events and products the Northeast and Caribbean MHTTC is providing, please sign up to receive our email communications. You can sign up at the bit.ly link provided on the screen, and I will also share this link in the chat box. Next slide. Following the webinar, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey. We value this feedback and use it to improve our activities and inform our future activities. The surveys are also important because of our continued funding is linked to the completion of these surveys. So we thank you in advance for your feedback. Next slide, please. We also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website along with the PowerPoint slides within a week. Next slide. This presentation was prepared for the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. All material appearing in this presentation, except that taken directly from copyrighted sources, is in the public domain and may be reproduced or copied without permission from SAMHSA or the authors. Citation of the source is appreciated. Please do not reproduce or distribute this presentation for a fee without specific written authorization from the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. At the time of this presentation, Tom Codir served as Acting Assistant Secretary for Mental Health and Substance Use at SAMHSA. The opinions expressed herein are the views of the speakers and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services or SAMHSA. No official support or endorsement of DHHS or SAMHSA for the opinions described in this presentation is intended or should be inferred. Next slide, please. The MHTTC network uses affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all activities. This includes language that is strength-based and hopeful, language that is inclusive and accepting of diverse cultures, genders, perspectives, and experiences, language that is healing-centered and trauma-responsive, language that invites individuals to participate in their own recovery journey, language that is person-first and free of labels, language that is non-judgmental and avoids assumptions, and that is respectful, clear, and understandable and consistent with their action policies and products. Now let's begin our webinar. We have with us Jay Ostrowski. Jay is the CEO of Behavioral Health Innovation, where he develops and deploys mental health, telebehavioral health, and telemap programs, and designs HIPAA-secure software applications such as adaptive telehealth. He also serves as a telehealth consultant and implementation partner for the Mid-Atlantic Telehealth Resource Center and is the director of the Telebehavioral Health Center of Excellence. So I will turn it over to Jay and welcome everyone.
Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here with you on the 6th of a series of 6 webinar on telebehavioral health. We've been covering it from different angles, and today we're going to talk a lot about training and lessons learned on rolling out. So I think you'll appreciate this. We're going to talk about a lot of things that may not be apparent up front. So I hope you take good notes because this is going to be a good one. I'm going to be, I'm a licensed professional counselor and supervisor if you don't know me. I've been doing this for almost 20 years and in different ways. The last 12 or so, I've been really concentrated on training and developing new products and services. I created the board certification in telemental health and tons of other stuff that are available online. I want to start out with a couple questions for you to answer for me, if you could. If you would type this in the chat, just some numbers, just put your numbers, you don't have to say much else. But besides this webinar series, how many hours of training have you received in telebehavioral health? How many hours of training have you received? Just go ahead and type a number in the chat, just so we can kind of see that and track that, because it's an important number. And I'll tell you a lot about why in a few minutes. So how many hours of training have you received in telebehavioral health? Just a few more seconds for more you people that type in a number. Maybe you're counting. Okay, the next one, I'd like you to give me 4 answers. How much telebehavioral health training do you think is necessary for people involved in this telebehavioral health service? So like 1 for psychiatrists, 2 for counselors, 3 for a manager, 4 for administrative staff. I like 1 answer for each. Just take a couple minutes and do that. It's going to be pretty important. So how much training do you think each of these staff should have? How many hours of training do you think each of these staff should have in telebehavioral health? Well, I'm going to move on here. It's good to see some of those answers there. I appreciate that. So imagine with me a scenario. You are called into a meeting with your boss about your new telebehavioral health program after watching this series, and you're not sure it's going to be a good one. You know that the program's not going well, and you might be have some backflips going on in your stomachs. The program's hemorrhaging a lot of money. You note some tech issues, some provider resistance. The program has a lot of no-shows, and you're curious because you heard the research said that it decreases no-shows. You look at the data and there's like no appointments for an entire week, and most of the ones on the calendars are the ones that you personally scheduled after significant arm twisting. So going into this meeting with your boss about this report on the new telebehavioral health program is not going to be a pleasant one. And despite marketing a lot, no one's really using it. So you've spent a lot of money on your program, and your program's clearly failing. It's not the picture that you want. And maybe you don't know what to do about it. And there are a lot of opinions of why, and that calls into question your abilities and your role in the company. How does it feel? It feels pretty terrible, right? So the purpose of this training today, sorry, Danielle, the purpose of this training today is to prevent that. So we are going to tell you some really good ideas on how these things go wrong and how to prevent that, because these are very real scenarios, and I've been called in to help on dozens of them. And when we do kind of a retrospectives, we find a lot of kind of missed opportunities to shore things up. And that's what I want to talk about today is the training side of this. I was going to do lessons learned on all the rollout, but that really would take a lot more than an hour. And since the seminars have been like rushed to pack in a lot of information, I thought I would spend more time today on the training issue, because that training issue is going to prevent and create like a problem-solving machine over time. So I want to help you with that. So why am I telling you all this? Well, I have a little bit of a background in telehealth training. I had my staff calculate some numbers, and they found that I've created over 100 courses in telebehavioral health content and digital mental health related stuff. I've done over 3,000 hours providing training for others in telebehavioral health. And of course, you guys know I created the board certification in telemental health. Training is very dear to my heart, and this method of webinars is not my preferred method. I prefer to go in person or on a video and do a lot of back and forth, ask questions. I prefer to do illustrations and have you participate in trying out ideas and kind of muscle memory, learn, not muscle memory, but kind of doing activities to help you learn. Because time's so short, we have to cram a lot in the webinar. I'll be starting with a series of these disasters to illustrate the main points of the lessons learned. And then we're going to end with kind of a what to do outline to help you adopt it for your program. So the learning objectives, already, is that we like to start with why. Why this seminar? Why do this? Then we're going to talk about some known issues with provider training. There are some known issues that I'll bring up, and then some lessons learned, and then we're going to talk about applying those lessons learned. So why do we need training? Wait, you might say, I thought this was easy. I use FaceTime with my family a lot. I use Zoom with my friends. Well, remember the scenario of the failing program? In my experience, it's very real and happens to about half of the people starting new programs. So with all the expense you're going to pay for starting the course, you want to make sure that you're really going to be implementing it well. Now, it's going to be said to you, or you're already thinking of it, gosh, it's expensive to pay for a telebehavioral health training course because you have to pay for the training and the salaries of the PhDs and the MDs and the other staff on the call. It's really a lot of money to do training. And that might be cost prohibitive in your scenario. You might need to think of, how would I wring that out of our budget, or where would I chip away? How would we do this differently? But I would say it's not really expensive in the overall scheme of things if the program fails. If the program fails to meet its goal, it will be much more expensive than the training, because all the work, all your salary, all the money spent on technology and training people and services have all kind of gone away. I've seen that happen over and over and over again. And I think one of the keys is this training process. So I would like to present to you these ideas because I think it'll really save you in the long run. The expensive training will have you take a little bit longer collecting your ROI, your return on investment. But again, it could be that you're struggling for years and not knowing why and not getting your ROI and being thrown under the bus by managers and other staff. You might end up throwing more money at it and trying to do more marketing and find out things are just not working. So I think you'll have some ideas by the end of the seminar of how to prevent some of that. You don't want to be the person, burning in their stomach or getting anxious about this every night because things aren't going well. You need to know that you've got a team behind you. And part of this training is when you're training your staff, you're training them to be a team of problem solvers to help you make this work well. And there's some very clear ideas I'm going to give you on how to do that. Your provider is going to tell you, hey, we don't have time for that. Your management will say, hey, look, I Googled it. I see the topic. We can even watch Jay's videos for free. He has several. They're going to give you all these reasons why you don't need more training. I'm going to give you a lot of reasons why you do. And you've seen in previous webinars, there's a lot of pitfalls that can go, and you want things that go offline, and you want to prevent them from happening. So some of this is creating your own structure, your own straw man, and rolling it out to your staff. But another part of it is at some point you need to help them co-design or co-develop with you. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So what's this training about? Why should you train, and how should you train? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. Lessons from failures that I've seen over and over again over the years. We don't want to repeat the same mistakes that other people have done. And we don't want to do the same thing over and over and hope to get different results. So training is difficult. as you might be thinking, how am I going to train my staff to do this? Training is difficult because you don't know what you don't know, right? So if you're new to this, or you practice some and you're unable to think of all the scenarios that can happen or what it's going to be like for somebody different, that can cause some anxiety as well. But the second thing that I found is that not only do you not know what you don't know because of lack of experience, is that telehealth is different everywhere. It's really different. So here's the concepts that you're given. You're thinking, okay, I go apply these, but then you're like, well, nobody mentioned this technology we have to apply it to, or this scenario that I'm applying it to. And that's where a little anxiety creeps in, and there's opportunity for some adjustments to be made. And you make the best of what you can. You're a professional, you make it work, but then you're wondering, will this work? And then when it doesn't work, because sometimes it doesn't, how will your staff respond? Are they resilient enough to roll with it and adapt a little bit, iterate, to keep it going until it's in a really good place? So the lack of education, sometimes it's the misinformation, sometimes it's the lack of experience from the trainer that could cause a problem. Also, things might be misinterpreted, like how things should be applied could be misinterpreted. So these are training difficulties. Of course, I'm bringing up more anxiety for you, but we're going to talk about how to resolve some of those as well. So there are also known problems with providers, maybe not your providers, just providers in general. I'm talking about the physicians and nurse practitioners, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, the social workers, the counselors, the addictions therapists, peer support. All these people have nurses. They all have their own different issues. These are kind of some common themes that I see over time. Is one of them is that they have some preconceived notions about telehealth. Maybe they think it doesn't work. Maybe they're super fanboys, fangirls, and they think it's super easy and this training is a waste of time, and they kind of check out. Or they're so concerned or so rigid about how it should go that you're not doing it right, and they're kind of constantly criticizing. Or they're thinking, that this can never work. This isn't going to be therapeutic. There's no way I can do my job. They kind of throw up a lot of barriers. You guys have seen this, the doctor no, I call them. There's reason that they have these questions and concerns, and we're going to talk about what to do with them as well. But they also may have learned some misinformation along the way, saying, oh, this technology is fine, and you don't need that level of security because of this or that. Or I can just wing it because it doesn't really matter. So there's some people that basically, because of the pandemic, jumped into things quickly and developed some bad habits. And so, or they have misinformation, and they're thinking they're doing the best they can or doing a good job, but they just don't know. They don't have enough education in this area to know what the dangers are, or how much of a liability it is for the company. So they have to kind of get some new education about that. Some of them are not self-aware. And I'm probably hearing laughing out loud across the country. They're not self-aware because we all notice things about them that we wish they would change. So self-awareness is a big issue in telehealth because you're presenting on this kind of video screen, and not everybody presents well. So they need some different feedback and different ways of kind of self-checking and have other people checking out their presentation to make sure that they're doing a good job presenting. Some people are just not open to learn something new, or they're not open because they're kind of technophobes. We've had that several times, and maybe they're closet technophobes, and you just learn that now that you're doing telehealth with them. They may have done a good face on it, but then eventually when it comes down to actually doing it, they self-sabotage, or they're secretly insecure about doing this. And some of them really need to have a sense that it's done perfectly. Some of them are really insecure about making mistakes and being looked to be foolish, or interpreted as not knowing what they're doing. And so they actually avoid doing this, or they avoid training, or they avoid practice in front of people because they want to make sure they get it done perfectly. However, it's that making mistakes in front of people that's going to give them, it's the remedy for the anxiety in the first place. And getting the feedback from a training group is going to be the thing that helps them do better long term. There are lots of other issues and other things, but these are things that I find are pretty common among providers. Not 100% of them, but there's some of these in every group. So the cure for that is to put out good information, credible information, using research as the backstop for why you're doing what you're doing. I'm going to tell you about some different kinds of training and tell about the kind of the characteristics of how to do that. Another issue is that you may have technical barriers, either on the provider side or your company side. You have to embrace them and say, hey, it is what it is. Let's deal with it. Let's work on it. Let's make it better. Providers and patients both need training. Sometimes they need handholding. So we find that one size doesn't fit all. There are quite a few people that can jump in and kind of self-learn and create their own muscle memory and do it well. Some people are going to need a one-to-one walkthrough to get them feeling comfortable with this. And maybe several. So it's imperative that you pick technology that is super easy to use, where links come easy and securely and login is simple. So that's really, really important. Some of the research that's been done and citations by other companies have shown sending a direct link to somebody after you get permission is high priority, and then making the appointment process super simple online is a high priority. But the barriers with technology may not be as obvious. So you need to kind of check in with each provider privately to make sure they're okay and offer help if they need it, so that they feel like they're not going to be publicly embarrassed or have some kind of issue with anybody else. So you want somebody warm and fuzzy reaching out to make sure that they're all good with what you're doing. The other thing that's often missed in training is the integration with your other systems. So you want to make sure that as you're looking to grow your program or scale or just make it work, that part of your training is, here's exactly how we're going to integrate with our other systems, and showing where the data goes or how it gets there and what information to put where, and go through little sample scenarios and have them do it live with them, and even turn the controls over and have them do it. So that they're familiar, and it'll feel like you're babying them, and you are. And then some of them will be a little upset by that, and majority of them appreciate that, because then they're not going to be embarrassed down the road. So showing them kind of hands-on way is preferred when you're talking about those integrations, because a couple of reasons. One, they'll mess up your program by putting things where they want to, or they won't use it at all or use it correctly. So you want that to work well. So part of your training program needs to include this kind of local interpretation and local integration with your other software systems if you're going to use different ones together. So I mentioned different types of training. So the different types of training that you provide are going to need different kinds of data and different kinds of participation. So most of us have been to trainings where it's about telehealth. Here's something about telemental health. It's just general nature. A lot of what I've been doing recently in this series has been, here are the principles, here's the research, here are some best practices. They're about kind of webinars. The second kind is where somebody's taken the about parts and said, here's how our company is going to do it exactly. So here's the precise methods that we've used, and they are based on this evidence, and you show the evidence, and you show the research, and you show the why. And that second part, how to do something specifically that's pre-vetted, you're saying, trust me, I've got a degree, or trust me, I've got the citations, and they're trusting your professionalism and your research. But you got to give them a little bit of evidence for that, so that they feel solid about it, because in the end, it is their licenses on the line, as well as the company's reputation and their reputation on the line. And nobody wants to get in trouble, so they don't want to lose their license. So give the providers confidence, and your management and your staff confidence, by citing some sources and laying it down as, okay, here's the core concept, here's the citation, here's our interpretation of it, and here's how we are going to apply it. And that's the very specific very specific application of vetted processes. So the high level principles I've been telling you about, The second is your part of interpreting those at your local level, your specific company policies, procedures. How are you going to do this, implement these concepts? The third part is taking it to another level. See, the second one is you're basically training people to be robotic. You're saying, do this protocol. Everybody's going to do it this way. We're all going to be this way. We don't have any variation because we're a large company or blah, blah, blah. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it has limitations too, and you need to be aware of them. So when you're scaling to a large company, that's exactly how it would scale. But what I would do is also add a layer of people in this third category, which is how to make something vetted or not vetted, or partially proven into concepts and local interpretations. So how do you turn the research data, the concepts, into a new thing that you have to develop for your company? And then how do you change as things go forward? So you might look at something and go, that's a problem, and then none of the best practices address it. So how do we get there? How do we create that? So some of your staff, probably you and probably other people in your management or administrative level, or maybe a clinician, is going to help, needs to be on this team of kind of problem solvers. Say, okay, here we know the principles really, really well. And because of that, we know the research well. Here's how we're going to adopt this or change that to make sure that this gap in the program is filled and we manage our risk. So these are people that are program creators in a sense. So to my mind, the most resilient program is when you have the combination of 1, 2, and 3, the about, the here's how we're going to apply the about, and then here's how we're going to change over time or adapt over time and be resilient. With 3 different types of training, not everybody can do all 3 types of training. You can imagine this would be a lot of training for anybody to get all 3 of these, right? So most often people are going with number 2. Program developers are usually getting all 3, but the second how-to treatment is what we normally distribute as widespread training with our participants. I also would say that there's another one kind of in between those 2 where you're answering questions and modifying the program based on feedback, and we'll get back to that. But in my mind, the best telehealth training is a combination of all 3, where you're poised to innovate and iterate over time. So some of the lessons learned, there are quite a few. I've condensed them. Instead of telling lots of war stories, I'm just going to be talking to you about a few of the highlights here, the bigger ones that are more common. Again, I've been doing this for a dozen years, training people in telemental health, telebehavioral health. I've trained licensure boards. I've trained governments. I trained for SAMHSA, HRSA, and the NIH, and other large organizations and other state licensure boards, other organizations, private and public. And these lessons have been found kind of across the board from all of them. I think the commonality are people. They're people here. So training is essential, but maybe for different reasons than you thought. So obviously, skipping training, you'll have a lot of the pitfalls and a lot of the roadblocks that we talked about before in previous sessions. So training, just people say, oh, we don't need that. That's just overkill, or somebody trying to make money, or it's pretty obvious we don't need that. They're wrong, but that's okay. If they went through a training, they'd see a lot more that they didn't know firsthand. And I think experiential training that I'll talk about in a minute is really helpful, especially for those folks. So here's some lessons learned from my firsthand experience training in telebehavioral health and consulting also, when I'm helping people get started or helping them expand their practices. Again, some of these might not be obvious. So doing some retrospectives with consulting clients, sometimes I'm called in when there's a problem, when their program isn't thriving, and they say, how do we get it to thrive? Because we spent all this money, we don't want to throw it all away. So we're kind of diagnosing kind of what was first, what was second, what was third, what's the nature of your training, what's the nature of your program, and kind of collect all the information. And sometimes we look back and go, if we would have done this kind of training earlier or had this person in place earlier, that would have prevented this problem. And that's what we're trying to do here. So one of those big ones is turnover. I've been in several situations where an organization got some grant money and thought, this is great, let's go develop a program. So thinking of it programmatically, they do what's logical in programs is to hire one person to be in charge of the program. And then from there, they get that person a lot of training, and that person develops practices and starts rolling it out. And then that person might have a baby, or that person, their spouse got a different job on the other side of the country. And or in actually a couple cases, it was interesting. It was overseas where they couldn't even do this over internet very easily, and just couldn't maintain that practice remotely 100%. Or in some cases, they took a different job with a competing organization even. Um, and it kind of bites to have stepped on your program. But so all the knowledge and all the experience and all the training went into one person, and then that person left. And I've had a couple of organizations that have done that repeatedly. And so obviously, when you're going to create a program, you need to cover yourself and have a couple different people trained so that the program can live without you. Even if you are the one that's going to take a better job, you want to leave a legacy, a positive legacy behind you of people that can pick up where you left off. And so be training. And number two, in my experience as a manager, I found that I'm often looking for people to work themselves out of a job by giving responsibilities to other people that can train, and then they can take on better responsibilities or higher level of responsibility because they've trained and oversee part of their job. So think about that when you're doing this, not to put all your eggs in one basket. You want several staff involved, and to expand that as broadly as you can afford to do that. The next one is part of the issue is training technophobes. There are technophobes in probably most companies. I had one. I went to a on-site to a consulting a gig, and we're all around a big conference table, and the person in charge of the telehealth program pulls out their flip phone, I kid you not, puts it on the table, and I took that as a message. So I took that person to lunch to kind of talk about how much they hate technology, and that's their phrase, and they can't believe they're doing this, but they've been put in charge of this by their boss, who didn't know that they really hate technology. So getting somebody in the wrong position is quite a different, it's quite an inhibiting thing. So make sure that the people that you're putting in leadership, people you're putting in key roles, are people that are not techophobes. So that might be, that might be your medical director. So if it is, you might need to go, or your head of nursing, you might need to talk to them about that and say, would it be okay if I had somebody else take this on and be the champion? And typically they'll say yes, because they don't want to be involved in it anyway. But you need to get their blessing, of course. And so getting them involved, getting them training, and they're going to need more one-on-one themselves to, you're going to need to help them experience it. That's going to be the thing that's going to change the tide for them, is experience it in a good way that'll help them habituate to it over time. So another part of it, I've skipped delay. I've had many circumstances where people have gotten training, and then different things happen, and they didn't get their first client for many months. Some people, it's been over a year. They got in training, they even got certified, and then they find that their knowledge got old because they didn't use it. It's kind of like a foreign language. If you don't use it, you lose it. And because there are consequences and things that can, bad things can happen, they get kind of nervous. And then because they're nervous, they just don't even try. So I've had several people come back for training. And what I would recommend to them is say, I'd like you to go ahead and get your first client ready so that we can start within a week or two. And they say, oh, I'm not ready for a week or two. I said, we're going to get you ready in a week or two, because they need to start using this as soon as they learn it. They need to start using it, because them using it will develop that memory, that muscle memory, and develop their comfort level with it as quickly as possible. So another one is we have some people that might sabotage because they're not open and honest about it. So it's really imperative that you kind of gauge who's on the staff and their comfort level with them. Even talk to them about it. I had one circumstance where a psychiatrist actually was slated to be a primary provider, and the guy kept showing up to our trainings with a computer that didn't have a camera. And so we talk about and problem solve a little bit on how we could make sure he showed up with a camera next time. 5 different trainings with no camera. We had an honest conversation finally about that when he said he really doesn't want to do this. And I kind of figured that out after the second one, but um, someone that's not willing to show up on camera or without a camera at all, that's not a great sign. So you need to find out that what people are willing to do early on so that you can do that. So one of the best ways to do that is to do a video conference call just to talk about the program. If you're all in person on site, I highly recommend that you ask everybody to go to their own offices and log in. Or go home and do your training from home. If you do your training 100% online, what's going to happen is you're going to habituate everybody to this. So it'll go quite well. So because of time, I'm going to keep going, but you have concerns from staff. You have people trying to develop a program, a committee. Those things don't work as well. So we're going to talk about what will. So participants need a vision. They need to know what is it that you're trying to accomplish. And the best way to do that is to really spell out like a play-by-play, what you would see on videotape. What exactly would a client is clicking on a button on a website. They're going to schedule their appointment. They're going to pick their own provider. They're going to fill out their initial paperwork. And you walk through a play-by-play of this vision of exactly what happens in the session and then after the session and the whole flow to help people get a picture of the beginning and the end and how well it can go. And then you want to train people to go with that vision. So here's exactly what you're going to need to do to accomplish those things. And you want to talk about the outcomes, the provider satisfaction, the front staff satisfied, the management satisfied, the patients or clients satisfied. And what does it take at each stage to have that satisfaction? It's usually the right data in the right place at the right time. It's usually an easy, positive, fluid experience. Those are the things that you can pick up those storylines and say, how do we create that? And then you make your training to match that experience. And if it doesn't match that, you want your providers to tell you, hey, I can't get that done this way. So here's some suggestions on how we could do it that way. So you're training them to be resilient, not to say no, not to say it can't be done, but say, here's how it could work for me, or could we change it this way to make it more fluid or better experience for everybody? You want everybody to have a good experience so that the program is sustainable over time. You also want your staff to have reasonable expectations. If you tell them that they're going to have a flood of new clients because so many people want telehealth, it's not going to be true. They are going to have some more clients, some different clients, and it is going to be weird and awkward at first. That's the same with doing anything new. But setting some realistic expectations and saying, I don't really know how it's all going to go. That's part of what you're going to help us figure out. So you're basically recruiting them to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And then you want to think about that's kind of the paradigm of resilience. So you're expecting that there'll be some stumbling blocks. That's why it's really good to start with a skeleton crew, like of your champions that are problem solvers, and create like a straw man that everybody can try out. And we say straw man and we say pilot because like my favorite phrase, nobody gets fired for a pilot. And then also to let them know that it's adjustable still. And not that we're not going to do it in the future, that it may look a little bit different as we get feedback. So them giving their feedback, them trying it on will help them feel like they're being heard, their concerns are being heard. So as you address those, they're going to get more buy-in and do a better job of the service for you. So that's the resilience training that I want to talk about. If you don't do that training of, hey, here's how we're going to iterate, here's how we're going to change, if you're not getting that, if you're not measuring and getting that feedback on a regular basis, especially in the first couple months, your program will be abandoned by the providers. Over time, they're going to go with what's more comfortable and what's easier, and they're just going to gravitate like gravity to the whatever is easier. So if it's not this telehealth program, they will abandon it. It's happened so many times. Even if they say they're gung-ho about it, if there's a tiny little stumbling block and they're not being addressed, then they're going to have a hard stop, or they're going to eventually not feel good about it, not feel confident about that. And providers' confidence is one of the number one things that you need. You need to train them until they feel a sense of competence and confidence in the program. And research is actually very clear about that. The outcomes of patients are highly affected by the confidence level of the provider in telehealth settings. So give your end state to them, talk about your goals, elaborate on it, talk about it in detail, not just we're going to do this virtually. You got to talk about paint the picture in vivid color of exactly what you're expecting to do. And maybe for managers, you say something like, you're going to open a report Monday afternoon and see the stats on your national network of counselors that have connected to clients without your direct involvement or the direct involvement of our staff. And then you're going to high five somebody because you're so excited that you actually met that goal. And here's all the money that came in, and here's all the insurance that's billed for this, and here's how we got paid. Or you see a report on your new telemap program, and it's added 10 new patients in the last 2 weeks. And then they're all attending both their medication appointments and their counseling appointments with only one dropout last week. So setting those kind of goals, painting that picture, will help your staff see here's what is expected. And then you create your training to fit those parameters. Then you ask them to participate in solving the problem for you of how to get that, not just once, but every time. So that's kind of rare in companies, sadly. But when you look at programs like we mentioned Chick-fil-A last time and other ones that look like a well-oiled machine, it's because they keep measuring, they keep asking, they keep iterating, they keep getting feedback and ideas from their staff on how to get better and better and better. And it's critical to have input from all the staff, not just the providers. So you need it from the management, you need it from the frontline staff that are talking to your clients or patients, you need it from the providers. And you need all of them to be trained in at least some level of this so they all get buy-in, all get vision. You need them all to experience a little bit of telehealth so they know what it's like. Because what can happen is if the provider leaves the provider room in person and goes to the checkout window and meets with someone that's paying the bill, and they ask about telehealth, and the person says, I don't know anything about that, or I wouldn't do that, but you can do it. If they get some kind of negative comment or smirk or roll the eyes or some squirmy look, then they're probably not going to go with it. They're not going to try it out for the first time. So you need everybody in your company to have the talking points that will talk the client or the patient into doing this. They all need to be consistent. And that multiple voice approach is going to help more clients adopt it. Same with the providers. If everybody in the company has the talking points and the research behind it, they're all going to be much more confident about doing the service and more likely to risk their license doing it as well. So applying lessons learned, we talked about the vision, that end state, and you want your training to match best practices and the legal and company kind of policy and procedure requirements. And then those desired results, that workflow and the goals that you have, you want to state them out loud. How many sessions you want a week? And then you're working at how we're going to get to there, because it's not going to just happen on its own. Even though we're all smart professionals, even though we care, even though we want to try, it's going to take some deliberate, targeted problem solving to get to the goals that you want. So put that on the docket immediately. It doesn't mean that it's a bad system that you've created. It just means that you don't know if the plan's going to work until you work the plan. But then once you do get the data, you find out how to make it even better or how to change it so it doesn't get worse. So that's going to take some problem solving. So you want to, in your training, train the providers to expect to do some problem solving along the way, and that you're going to be asking regularly for their feedback to get that buy-in. Again, if you don't measure, you don't manage. So you need to measure what's important to you, and make sure you give all the people on the team that feedback so they understand the state of your program. And then you collectively ask for, and individually, what do you think we could do to improve any of the things you're measuring? So here's some other lessons learned I want to give to you. So first one I talked about is training on video. I've had a lot of people, because of Zoom fatigue or meeting fatigue, they want to turn their video off. I highly recommend that you turn the video on and you ask everybody to turn it on and tell them this is part of your training. Because what you're doing is you're kind of evaluating their presentation. And then you ask them, I'd like you to show up on these meetings as if you're going to see a client. And that's going to help you kind of practice getting ready for this. And you'll see how they're framed or not framed in the window. You'll see what their background looks like. If they're doing this from home, you see how professional they're showing up. And then at some point in your training, you need to give them the feedback on their presentation skills. If they're slouching, if they're leaning, if they're eating and drinking online, you want to say you need to show up to these trainings as if you're going to an appointment. Because again, this is practice to be professional online. It's a little bit different than in-person therapy, in that you have to be in this frame and look a certain way, but it's imperative that they get that muscle memory again of professionalism in the video space. Also, you want in your training, you want not just to have the about model, you want them to know exactly how to do your processes, your protocols, and you want them to practice it with a colleague. And I would say do this 2 or 3, 4 times, because the first couple times they're going to be clunky. It's going to feel weird, just like everything does. But if they practice it a few times, you want them to get feedback from other people on how they did it. This also vets your protocols. So maybe you did some of the vetting already with your champion team privately or yourself, and you walk through it with your friends and family. But now that you're doing it with a team, you see how other people interpret what you do. Sometimes you don't notice how somebody might interpret it, or a different personality or different role might implement things very differently. So just because it's in paper and spelled out well doesn't mean they're going to do it exactly the way you want. So you want to observe and see how multiple people implement your processes in your training. And then you want to have different people give them feedback. So we like to pair and share or do things in triads, where we're doing that with our peers. And that's kind of helping us habituate, kind of get comfortable with doing this process. And we have them take notes, and we say, to be professional, to get this to a high level of a good experience for you and the client, we need to practice this. And so you force that, even though they may not be so happy about it. You also want to talk about presentation skills, and talk about putting their pets away, and talk about all the things that go into that, making things turn off their alarms and everything else. You also want to practice emergency protocols. One of the experiences I had was a large practice group. I had trained a year previously, and they asked me to come back and do another big training. I was curious about that because the majority of them got certified within a different certification before me, and they had a lot of other training, more than what I gave them, and they still weren't really practicing. Only 1 or 2 were practicing, and not very much at that. And so I came in and I had a whole presentation ready to go, like a half-day workshop. But I stopped, and I just struck by them not learning from the last couple of trainings. I just said, I'm really curious. I want to learn what's it been like for you guys. And I got their feedback, and it started with a lot of hoeing and humming and excuse making. And eventually it came out that basically the majority of them are not comfortable with how to handle emergencies. And so we just spent the last couple with the whole thing practicing what they would do in emergency. And somebody went to another room and played mentally ill, and with a severe psychosis, and with a shotgun, and they just providers love to muck it up. They played out this scenario, and then we had everybody take turns in the hot seat with what they would say, and we did it on speakerphone from different rooms, and they all got to hear what the other person was doing. So they got to hear how other people would handle these emergencies. And then it suddenly struck one of them that, hey, this is not that different than telephonic emergency services. We've been doing that for years. And I said, yeah, but now we have video to see them. And they said, yeah, this is actually easier. And so once the light bulb went on and they practiced it a little bit, now they're the feedback I got, a couple months later, full practices, which was just before the pandemic. So that was really timely. So you might need to facilitate some of those experiences, especially the people that are technology hesitant or technophobic, as they may call it, just to help them have a sense of practicing it. So once they practice the worst case scenarios, they find that everything else is kind of easier after that. And once they know how to recover from a tech issue, or the video cuts out, or they have to start over. Once they get a couple experiences of doing that well, then they're usually okay with the rest. So that's what some of the best practices of training is going to have you do. And then you also want to localize that, make sure it's fitting with your protocol exactly. And they're doing your protocol, and you're verifying that they're doing the protocol and giving them feedback on it, getting their feedback on how to make it even better. You might also want to create reminders, little cheat sheets that they can have by their workstation, or email to them, ask them to print it out, something like that, so that they can see a really quick, easy guide, bullet pointed. You might have a really long manual with screenshots, or you might have something really easy. Um, I would recommend maybe both, because you have different types of learners. But you want something that's a quick reference guide so that they feel like they can pick it up in emergency and go with it. Another thing is that you need to provide training to all of your staff, and all your staff, not just about their role, but about the whole vision and kind of the whole cycle. And you may not go into detail with every other other role, but they need to know what their role is doing and how it's part of the bigger vision. They also need to know that other parts of the process are being taken care of by other people, and who is doing that, because you might need them to pick up some of the pieces along the way, just in case. And they also need to know that it's being done. They need to have confidence in your program. So they need to know that it's been done thoroughly and competently. So while you might want to isolate and firewall some of the things just for time and expense, it is good to give them an overview of that. So now, when we talk about training all the roles, we first, a few sessions ago, talked about creating a champion team. Choosing your leadership, if you're able to, is pretty important. Choosing a champion at different levels of the organization, a manager and an admin, a provider, and any of the other roles that would be affected by patient care or client care. Including these people that are not technophobic is pretty important. Make sure that they're going to be on board, that they understand and they share the vision, they have buy-in. This is your early adopter problem solving group that creates a straw man that you're going to roll out to the rest of your group in a broader training. You also need to know, how does your staff learn? In my experience, the best is a combination of audio and visual and experience. So you need to create scenarios where they can do some experiential learning, practicing their telebehavioral health sessions. And there are many different ways to do this. I do this for several universities. We create little exercises and courses on how to do that. And it can be fun. It could be team bonding, team building. But it's really important, because there are different types of learners. And if you look back at what has failed in other programs, it's usually that the learning style didn't match the person. That's a very common thing that happens. And also, you want them to evaluate your training. It's a little nerve-wracking and feels a little insecure, but you want them to tell you how to get better next time. And then you want to come back to them and train them again, maybe in less time, but really hit the high notes again in a staff meeting or in after hours, or in order to remind them of their training, because us learning something once doesn't mean we remember it. So you want to remind them and remind them and remind them along the way, just like you should be doing with your security protocols also for technology, is reminding them of the things that you're doing, and them hearing it again is really good for them to remember. They may have missed one or two things in there. So that's pretty important. But then that feedback, and then them seeing that you implemented their feedback, will increase their trust in the program and their confidence in the program, which does lead to those patient outcomes. So as you communicate, make sure you're illustrating really clearly, and even use those examples I talked about, where you're walking through what you would see on videotape or digital video, what each role will be doing, and the outcomes that you're wanting, that the outcomes that you're looking for. You want to make sure you're answering their questions, either privately or publicly, and really find out, dig out any fears they have, and help them basically tell you, no, I'm good, I got it, I'm well trained. And that's part of that resiliency of the program, is making sure they're participating and they're all knowledgeable, they all feel really good and comfortable about it, but also learning, they're all actively involved in making this work, solving the problems that might arise, because always unexpected problems do arise. One last thing one of the last things I want you to be thinking about is educating patients or educating clients. Some people might say, oh, that's a worksheet that we give out, or that's on our website. In my view, in my experience, that's not good enough. You need everybody in your company with talking points to educate patients, to help them understand what the benefits are, what the process is, so that they're able to jump in and help when needed, or they're able to fill in a gap or give good information. When a patient or client asks and the staff doesn't know, it actually makes the client insecure. Even if they're saying, oh, that's somebody else's job, or you can find on the website, it sounds like you're not really involved in your program, and you're not very confident in your program if you can't answer the simple question. So clients can build it up in their mind that is too complex for the doctor to understand or know. So they may not even try, may not even go into the reference that you are looking for. So on the screen, I'll leave this for you as we're wrapping up. I want you to know that educating clients, again, is pretty important. And I wanted you to know some of the talking points we use. Kind of the benefits of it are not having the time costs or transportation costs. They don't have to do parking or pay for gas or take the time to travel. We talk about the no need to take off time from work or doing elder care or child care, and less exposure to illness, definitely given the pandemic. And so lots of things like that are important. You might have even privacy issues or less stigma issues, are kind of things you can tell your client that will help them take this on. You might have your own talking points, but whatever they are, make sure that your clients are aware of the benefits, and maybe you post them around your office, put them on your website. But all of your providers, all of your staff need to know these talking points as well. So as we are wrapping up, I want to remind you guys that you have free grant-funded assistance this Friday between 12 and 2. If you go to the matrc.org website, there's a video link in the middle of the page where you can join me, and I answer random questions that are your program-specific questions on how you do this or that. And we're there to help you answer those questions. And so we also have assistance outside that time, and we'll give you lots of other resources that will fit your paradigm, things that we couldn't answer here. Somebody mentioned role play. We can role play on that call, not on this one, but definitely that's a pretty important thing to be doing as you practice this. We also have other courses that we can help you learn how to do those things, emergency management plans and risk management plans. Because that's part of the training that will help the providers feel more comfortable. I want to just say thank you for everybody for joining me for all of these, and we really do need your feedback so that we have good information on how to get better at doing this. And it's essential for the funding too. So I want to turn it over to Maddie and close up and just thank everybody for having me on.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much. We have 2 questions in the chat box for you as we're approaching the top of the hour. Could you please repeat the day and time? I believe it's Friday.
This Friday, every other Friday at 12 Eastern. Go to the MATRC website. Right in the middle of the page, like scroll down just a little bit, it'll be events, and it'll have a link to a video, and just at 12 or 12:30, whatever time you want to, between 12 and 2. There's no program, it's just open office hours, and I'm answering people's random questions. Sometimes we have 5 people, sometimes we have 20, we just never know.
Thank you. And then we have a question. Yes, can we do some role plays like you mentioned, psychotic and then suicidal or client with guns with telehealth emergency situations?
We do, it's going to take a little bit more time than we have. I'm going to put the website in here, matrc.org, matrc.org. In the middle of the page, those should be events, and probably has my picture there, I think. And I'm talking about telebehavioral health, telemental health, and telehealth in general. And every other Friday between 12 and 2, I'm on at the same link, and you can join me when you want to, and I'll answer your random questions.
Thank you, Jay. So if you could advance the slide a little bit, please, to the QR code. Thank you. So as I mentioned before, we are a SAMHSA funded program, And as part of this funding, we are required to evaluate all of our product services and training events. So the image that you see on the screen is the QR code to our short evaluation survey. And this will allow us to get your feedback on the quality of this event. And also, if you move it to the next slide. Oh, there's a needs assessment slide that I had. Maybe towards the end. No.
That is all I have.
Okay. All right. So in addition to that, we are also conducting a needs assessment survey. I will send out a link to that survey in our follow-up email, and I will also send everyone an email containing the link to our evaluation survey. So you'll receive two. And also our presenter slides and recording will be posted to our website in the next several days. If you could please just bear with us for a moment while we catch up on our uploading, and then I'll send out an email announcement to all our participants from today, as well as our previous webinars, with all of the links to our recording. So we appreciate your patience in advance. And I don't see any other questions. And again, I just wanted to say thank you to Jay for providing us with the series of telehealth and telebehavioral health services, planning and investing for your future services series. We thank you for being with us today, and we hope to see you again in our upcoming training webinars.